Hello and welcome back to Processing the Process, where we capture and discuss the technical, psychological, and contextual dynamics that shape the process of creating a work of art. Week by week, moment by moment, we are following Jonathan Riddell, choreographer and artistic director of Riddell Dance Theater, as he creates his latest works for RDT's Second Story Dance project and delves into new creative territory. Today we are finally, drumroll please,
Yes.
going to talk about the Steffi Nossen Choreographers Showcase that took place at the Emelin on November the 10th.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll give you a little pre-show run-up.
Oh boy, yeah.
And a show breakdown. And we will also follow that with the November second story rehearsal, the November 14th second story rehearsal. So a lot on the agenda today, a lot to delve into. So starting just before the show began, maybe a couple of days before, I think, John, when John receives the information from Steffi Nossen that his best laid plans for makeup usage for Lorena and Mandy, which, as you may recall, involved the lower arm going into the hands, the lower legs going into the feet, and the sort of, I call it the mask up here, that the makeup on the arms and legs could not be used because it would leave residue on the stage, and given the flow of the performances, there wasn't the time, according to them, to be able to clean it up before the next act. I'm thinking next performers came on stage. So that left you in a bit of a quandary. What to do? Do we just go with the mask? Do we forgo it altogether?
Yeah, that was
How'd
a
you
tough
handle that
decision.
one?
Well, first of all, I just, it was funny because, of course, I needed to talk about this with them ahead of time. I really didn't think it would be a problem. It didn't even occur to me. And then it was after our last rehearsal, as I'm wiping some of the makeup off of the rehearsal floor, which again to me is
not a big deal,
fairly commonplace, but again, if you know it's coming, it then occurred to me, I was like, maybe I need to check with them about if this is okay. And then sure enough, I got in touch with them and they were like, oh, that actually might be a bigger problem than we realized. And I think it was actually in the technical specifications of the theater that said that that it was a problem. So I was like, man. And and as you know, if you've been watching these videocasts, it's been weeks or at least a month of figuring out this makeup and hemming and hawing over it, and then cut. But hey, that's them's be the breaks. So what we ultimately decided is to just go with the makeup on the face. I figured that was, everybody puts makeup on their face to perform, so that shouldn't be a problem. And we would just do it very lightly so it blended. It wasn't quite so stark, and it would just kind of, again, elevate the look of the ladies for the work. So yeah, and in the end, it was not truly missed. The piece stands alone. The costuming works regardless, so it wasn't like it didn't hurt the piece in any way, I don't think. So.
And perhaps still recalling our conversation in a previous video cast, it was suggestive, hinted at a feeling that which is
the
what you wanted
makeup
in the first
was
place.
It was subtle to begin with, so that's fine.
So thankfully. Well, now we come to the day of the show, and that is not without its external challenges right off the bat as well, which we did know coming in. For example, we knew that Mandy would have her kids with her. We knew Jonathan would have his kids with him.
Yes.
We did know that Lorena's husband Jose was going to be taking care of Sebastian, but it was not clear if Sebastian would actually leave the theater and wanted to, continue to stay with mom.
Yeah.
So that was a question mark.
And the other kids.
And the other kids,
Yeah.
exactly. And I guess not, this is probably common, I'm guessing, John, that the dancers were sharing a dressing room with dancers from other companies.
Yes. Yeah, that's
right?
common. Yeah.
But perhaps what was not so common, I'm guessing, is that they shared it not only with the dancers from the other companies, but with the children.
With all these children that we brought with us.
So, I imagine
Surprise.
that had to factor into the ladies' psychology in terms of preparing at that point for the show.
Oh, of course.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, talk about external challenges. And we knew that right after the tech rehearsal, Jonathan had to go back to Northern Westchester and get his wife and bring her back and have the kids going both ways. So it's a lot going on besides the actual performance-related agenda. But as a result, I thought to myself, I think it would be a good idea if I watched all these kids.
Sherry stepped up to the plate. Yes.
And my goal was to keep them entertained and engaged and ensure that they didn't disrupt the Steffi Nossen staff and the Emelin staff. Nonetheless, we commandeered the entire Emelin lobby.
You did.
Had
That's okay. Nobody else was there. At that time. No.
Fortunately, and we were off to the races, literally, and had some wicked Uno games going there.
Okay. Yes, I think my
Absolutely.
kids learned how to play Uno from you that day.
They did. So juggling lots of balls, but I knew this was important because Lorena and Mandy really needed to mentally prepare for the performance. Of course, physically warm up. And Jonathan was busy with the Emelin and Steffi Nossen tech people to get all of those details smoothed out for the tech rehearsal. So I was just hoping I could hang in there with them long enough for you to do what you needed to do.
Yeah.
Therefore, I don't even know what John wound up doing. So I'm going to find out with you right now. Can you take us through tech rehearsal, or the highlights at least? What is that like?
Well, so it was, as is kind of typical in this type of show, we just had a very short window of tech time for our piece. I think this was just 20 minutes to have the dancers go up on the stage, mark through the piece in the space to get familiar with the space, and then run the piece once to the music. And in that run is when maybe we did a sound check. I don't even recall if we did a sound check before. I think they just played the music when it was time to run the piece, and it sounded fine, so yay. So that was the check. And the lighting designer, every show I do is different. The context, especially for lighting, is different. In this particular case, I had written communication with the designer before, where I had a form that I filled out to describe the piece to him, but I had no idea if I was walking into him starting the design cold that day, or if he had maybe prepared something and wanted to show me what he had prepared, or if he had an entire design laid out and just wanted me to okay it. It's like I've done all variations of that. And in this particular case, I think he was operating pretty cold, pretty on the spot. But I took it upon myself to go and speak with him. I think maybe other people were fine to just kind of shout up to the light booth, like, give me more of this, give me more of that, or whatever. I don't know. I wanted to, shake his hand and meet face to face, have a bonding 30 seconds. Hi, we're about to create art together. Let's say hello at least, which I think was good. And almost immediately, I've learned also to ask, like, so what's the process going to be for the next 20 minutes?
Right.
Sometimes, because sometimes I'm sitting there and I don't know. Again, like all those things that I've said. Well, do you have a design already in mind? Do you just want to hear what I envision for the piece? We could just sort of uncomfortably pass words to each other, or we could actually talk about what the process is going to be. So we did that, and he's like, well, I'm going to create a few cues, and you can tell me what you think, and then we'll adjust during the run. I was like, great. So that's pretty much what we did, and again, that's also a typical scenario for this type of a show. So it was something I was used to, but it was a very short amount of time. So I really just had to say, look, you do your thing. I'm gonna stay out of your way. So he did create one or two looks with me next to him, so I was able to give him some feedback while the ladies were spacing the piece by themselves. Great. Now, luckily, that's another aspect of the tech, is sometimes the director, me in this case, needs to be focused on the dancers as they space, but I really trusted Mandy and Lori to do that themselves, and we had talked a lot about the space in the rehearsals leading up to it. And one of the things we talk about is our relationship to center, the center of the stage. And in a piece like this, I have you can choose spots on the stage, based on all sorts of grid lines on the stage. You can talk about the space in a million different ways. For me, I really just keep relating it to that center mark, and just you're moving a little bit away from it and coming back to it, a little bit away from it, coming back to it. And while that shapes the piece itself, it's also nice when you have a piece like that, because any place you go, every place has a center. Right. Not every place has the marks that you want on the outside of the stage, because every stage is shaped differently. Right. But every stage has a center. So I like it when I can design pieces that way, because then it cuts out a lot of questions later.
Exactly.
So the ladies were able to figure out, I think 99%. I think maybe they had one question for me, and I was able to work with the lighting designer, and that was great. So then we ran. It was time to run the piece, and that all went well. I did then, even though I liked the lighting cues I saw at first when he made them, it always is different, when you see it in its true context with the dancers and with the music, and how long everything takes, and how it truly fits with the piece. And so I did have some notes after to change the lighting a little bit. And I remember a big change was I had originally envisioned the lighting to be very cool. We talk about colors in terms of, on stage, in terms of warm or cool. And warm is usually in the yellows and reds, and cool is in the blues, or the white light is more cool compared to a more yellow light or an amber light. And I had originally told him, oh, this is a cool piece, blah blah blah, and then when I really watched it, I was like, nope, this is a warm piece. We totally let's just turn that on its head. But I couldn't tell that until I really saw the piece on stage, the dancers there with their costumes. Their costumes were kind of an off-white, and it occurred to me, I was like, oh, it really needs to complement that the off-white, not the white.
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference. So I think I had to talk to the stage manager at that point, and she then communicated to the lighting designer because he was up in the lighting booth.
Okay.
And I was like, could you please explain to him that I now want this to be warm and put some warm color on the backdrop? And she was like trying to relay my like very artsy question up to him, which she did it brilliantly. She's like, put some amber on the scrim, and he just went boop, and I was like, thank you. Good job. Thank you for translating for me.
Right.
Yeah. So.
But interesting how some things, I guess, really you can essentially be speculating about up to the show, but don't truly know, I guess, until you really see it in its show context.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Well, and again, that's why, I mean, ideally you spend time with a designer. Ideally you have a meeting or two beforehand and you talk about these concepts, and we could, and still it's not until you really see it, but and ideally you then have the time, you have hours of tech for a show. Some people have days of tech for a show.
How nice.
We had 20 minutes for a short, a relatively short piece, but it took a little, it actually took a little chutzpah and some courage on my part. The run was done, tech was moving on, but I really had to be like, wait, I'm sorry, this is really important. I need to ask for a couple more things, but it made all the difference.
Oh,
it really did. It really did. So I think they were prudent choices.
Excellent. And this is, and now hearing this, I'm really glad I hung in there with those kids, considering that you had to give your full attention.
Yeah, I know. I think if the kids had been there, I mean, maybe I would have been able to have that thought process and step aside and say what I needed to say. But I may have also just been like, I don't care, it's fine, whatever. Like, just let me get my kids out of here. So yes, thank you.
Oh my gosh, I'm relieved to hear this.
Uh-huh.
And well, the day was structured in such a way that the tech was then over for our group, and then John could return to Northern Westchester, and Lorena, Mandy, and her kids, and I went to Mandy's house.
Oh,
for
right,
lunch,
that's right, yeah.
And to, regroup a bit, and for the ladies to rest somewhat, and then return to the Emelin to prepare for the big show. So, John, what we didn't really get a chance to get into was how you were feeling in the hours, or let's say even in the 24-hour run-up.
Oh gosh,
to the tech rehearsal and then to the show.
Uh-huh.
What was going on for you? I think this is really a fascinating thing, both for those in the dance world and for those of us who are not quite as familiar. What does the artist go through when it finally comes time to share his or her work with the public?
Yeah, I was surprised at how I felt. I was really nervous, really anxious, and I don't know if I want to say down on myself, but there was definitely like a sober kind of sadness to how I was feeling, and all I could, I don't know if I can say why exactly, but it has to have been just a huge amalgam of things. I was confident in the choreography. I was confident in the dancers, I think I was probably just naturally nervous about how it would be received, which for some reason surprised me. I think because I felt I was confident about it, but at least a day or two before the show, I started to get really kind of anxious. There were, of course, all the logistical things that needed to fall into place, but those were all ironed out pretty well ahead of time. I think we were really prepared for this show, but oh man, maybe because we were so prepared, I could actually feel all of these things. I wasn't racing around like I normally am. So you're just pushing your feelings down or something because you've got so much stuff to do. I was really oh man, this is rough. I was nervous about how the kids would react, how the kids would behave, and of course they were great. They were perfectly fine, but I was nervous about all that.
Understandably.
This was my first premiere in a long time. My was it over a year or two? I think 2015 was the last time I actually did a piece with costumes and lighting. No, that's not true. There was the ABB performance this summer. Right. So who knows? Why was I so... I don't know. The piece itself is sort of somber and tortured in its context. Right. So maybe I was really just thinking about that a lot too. But yeah, I was definitely my heart was grouchy.
Well, hang on to that thought because we're going to pick it up shortly as we go on to have John analyze what actually occurred. But a couple of questions first, maybe perhaps somewhat related to your feelings, I don't know, but the fact that you, Lorena, and Mandy have not performed on stage in years, probably corresponding to the birth of each of your kids. So it's been a long time. And I wondered if that might have impacted the way you experienced your return to the stage. Now, you weren't actually dancing in this case, but from an overall perspective, I wondered if that did have an impact.
Maybe. I certainly could have been, if the ladies felt at all nervous in that way, I probably was feeling that from them, or feeling that for them. It is the first time that this project has galvanized to the point of costumes and lights and a paying audience, and we've been working on this for 2 years, so there's been a lot of anticipation. And I don't feel like I didn't feel like expectations were astronomically high or anything like that, but I bet on some level they were. Yeah, it's funny. And it's just wild. Yeah, I mean, not having performed in a long time. I think also for me, I mean, even though we've been so close, there's also they're performing my work for the first time. I hope it goes well, and I hope they enjoy themselves or have a fulfilling experience with it. Or might they come away going, "Oh yeah, I don't like performing Jonathan's work."
Oh gosh.
That could be.
Oh my.
Now Lori has performed my work before, so I'm trusting she has returned to work with me because she does enjoy performing my work. But it's there's 1,000 doubts that can go flying through your mind. So
But one follow-up question, in general, actually, do you think that as a choreographer and director, the meaning that you make of the presentation of your work at any point in time, that, I mean, I think meaning is made retrospectively, so that when you think about it, you know, maybe a week from now, 5 months from now, a year from now, might the way in which you make meaning of it change? Do you find that has happened with other works that you've done?
I mean, in the sense that, you know, you can gain perspective on your own life story, kind of a thing. Like, oh, in retrospect, that was a great stepping stone towards X, Y, and Z, which happened later, or that was a beautiful way to end this stage of my life, or something. Sure, but I feel like my opinions of the dance itself or the performance itself are what they are. I have at times gone back and looked at videos and sort of changed my feelings about how things went, for better or for worse. Sometimes better, sometimes worse. Usually better. Usually it looks better with age, but that is an interesting question. I mean, I think what really shifted, because maybe you're intending on talking about this in a minute, but my mood, my sort of grouchy heart mood that I was describing did shift come performance time, and maybe I should talk about that.
Yeah, I was going to say, now, you know, drum roll, please.
Yeah.
Can you?
So how did it all go?
How did it go? What was your, well, two parts that are related. What is your analysis of the actual performance, and what feelings did the performance elicit?
Yes. So, leading up to the show, there was I was starting to push the performer's emotional aspect, the way they put emotional qualities into the piece, and we've talked about that on these videocasts before. And you know, my intention was to just sort of bit by bit insert a little more, and let them find that, which is what we did. But the day of the show, even, the technical rehearsal, their run in the tech rehearsal, was even a notch more. And that got me very excited. And I really was like, in my mind and in my heart, I was like, but they could do even more. And it really was something I wrestled with, to say to performers, you know, basically like, okay, now the next time you're going to do this is in the performance, and to say to them, like, you know what, really go for it, really push it. Where you guys ended the piece, at the emotional peak that you guys ended that run, I want you to start there next time. And I feel like that's something we've all heard before, at least dancers of our experience level. Like, we all kind of know what that is, but it can still kind of be a really weighted comment to say, because it's like, oh, you really want me to like go out there and just, I don't know, blow up this dance and see what happens? Okay, you know, ideally you've tried that once or twice in rehearsals. Right. But you know, again, like I said, I've certainly been there, where you're about to go on stage and the director's like, you know what, just like, blast it to the rafters. And you're like, oh, okay.
It's a calculated risk,
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. And I just, and again, I don't, Mandy and I and Lori and I don't really know each other in that capacity, but I was like, I gotta just say it, because I think they could do it, and I think we're at the point now where the piece would really just glow if we pushed it. So I went ahead and said it, and they were kind of quiet, but they nodded, and I felt like they kind of understood, and I was like, okay, well, let's see what we got. Mm-hmm. So then that was after the tech, I gave them that note, and then for the performance, I was like, all right, guys, just do your thing. Great, love you. And the curtain went, I keep saying, as I tell people, I say, and the curtain went up. It didn't, the curtain was already up, but the lights came up on the opening tableau, and I just relaxed into my seat. I could see it in their bodies and on their faces that they were at that level, and they hadn't even moved yet. They were completely still. They were just in this pose, but there was like there was a fervor, there was a glow, there was a tremor almost, and I was like, oh, they're doing it. Yes. This is gonna be good. And I did, like, all my kind of anxious directorness went, and I was just an audience member, and I gotta say, I was hooked. The whole piece, I was like, this is beautiful. I was so proud. I really thought they looked tremendous, and the piece just reverberated.
Nice word.
And yeah, all of the images that I was trying to create really came out.
Yes.
And I remember then when it ended, you turning around and being like, and my sister was right in front of me, and she turned right around and, like, elbow over the seat, and was like, good job. And I was like, yes, thank you very much. So when your family, and I have tough family, that.
Yes, you do.
Like, all of my family is in the arts, and they're all, they all have their opinions, but they're all very supportive. But they they don't give sweet compliments just for that sake, So I knew it really meant something.
It was interesting for me, actually, as I'm watching them, and what's coming up in my mind is, I remember Jonathan giving that note. Oh yes, I remember him talking about that. Oh yes, that's, like, all your notes were
bubbling
to
the surface, yeah.
And being embodied with that additional degree of emotionality that you were asking for. And one of the moments I told the ladies that just captured my attention was when Lorena looked like she was literally clawing through her clothing and clawing at her own skin because she was so agitated and so stressed. And I just, in that moment, for me, all of your direction coalesced, and there it was, and it was just very powerful and captivating. And I'm guessing that's what you were going for.
Yes. Powerful and captivating, yes.
Exactly. And I also noted Mandy's face in that opening stance. And I looked at it and I thought,
yeah, I'm telling you.
Yes, it
right
was right
from go.
There,
yeah.
Right from the get-go, and the entire piece just took off from there.
Yeah.
So it was really incredible.
I was very happy.
Yay! And then
it was. I want to say almost. It was worth the 48 hours of wanting to vomit.
Oh my gosh!
And the 2 years of work leading up to it, yeah.
Exactly. And following the performance, or not only your performance, but all of the performances was, as often happens, a Q&A. And so John was part of that with all of the other choreographers of the pieces that were showcased that day. John, what was that particular Q&A like for you, considering that I'm imagining you've done quite a few in your
I have,
years, both
yes.
at Limon and then afterwards on your own. Compare, contrast, any thoughts? Was that pretty typical?
I think it was pretty typical. Yeah, I mean, we all the choreographers were lined up. We went down the line, and the curator of the show introduced us, and then we just mentioned what inspired our works. And I think from there she opened it up to audience questions. And I thought the audience asked some fairly interesting questions. They always do. Yeah, I mean, it felt like a typical Q&A. I remember, and again, maybe it's because I hadn't done one in a while, I wanted to like answer all of the questions. I had something to say about all of those questions. And I had to really like I actually had to hold back after a while. I was like, Jonathan, come on, let other people talk. So I remember that being particularly kind of funny, to myself, just in the experience of like, oh, why don't you pass on that question? Let somebody else answer it, or oh no, I really want to answer it. Give me the microphone.
Did you feel at ease?
And then I felt bad because then when Allie, our colleague Allie, so somebody who I knew in the audience raised their hand and asked a question, I had already answered like 3 or 4, so I was like, oh, I should really skip that. But I know she's kind of asking that so that I'll answer it. But we got to talk later. We got to talk after the show.
Exactly. And did you feel at ease? Are you ever worried that an audience member may challenge you in some way or express something that throws you off, or does that not usually happen?
I think that's always in the back of my mind. I'm pretty confident at this point that I'll be able to answer the question in some way, shape, or form. Yeah, I mean, I've had that experience where people have kind of challenged the work or challenged the piece, or been like, "What did you mean by that?" And you're like, "Oh, I don't know." Or what I meant was abundantly clear to everyone else in the room, but you, okay. But I don't think that happened in this case. I have to say, I was so pleased with my own piece at that point, that, I kind of came onto that stage for the Q&A with a certain level of confidence of like, well, even if someone says that was terrible, I hated it, I could be like, well, sad for you, because that was actually amazing.
Wow. And it was. And here we were in a position where we had to move right along a couple of days later to prepare for another show.
Right.
The Art Life program on December 9th in Mamaroneck with the Mamaroneck Arts Council. So the last part of our video cast today will be devoted to the November 14th rehearsal. Now, of course, external challenge right off the bat. John texts the group the day before to say that Edgar is sick and therefore you cannot attend rehearsal.
Right.
But knowing that there were 3, maybe 4 rehearsals left before the Art Life show, John laid out a suggested agenda and recommended to the ladies that they really schedule their time carefully to make the best use of the rehearsal to work on all of the pieces. And you mentioned that you would be working on your solo at home, so at least you tried to cover your bases. But I imagine, and you tell me if I'm right, that missing the rehearsal might have been difficult, well, maybe on many levels, but at least on two that I can think of. And one is that this is the rehearsal immediately following the show, so you didn't really have some nice processing time
Right. Yeah.
with your
No.
colleagues
Yeah.
as you might have.
It was sad.
And number two, okay, we have a show, and I can't be at this rehearsal.
Yeah.
And if that fourth one is no good during the holidays, there's three, and this one is one of the three. Okay.
Yeah, pretty much. It was not ideal. It was not an ideal time to miss. The saving grace was that the duet was my primary piece that needed to be rehearsed, and we had just spent months rehearsing it and just performed it. So really the focus of this rehearsal was to get back Mandy and Lori's work, which doesn't involve me at this point. So I knew a completely productive rehearsal could happen without me, so fine. If it had to be one of these days, sure, then that was okay. But yeah, it didn't bode well for my own mood. You're right. It didn't even occur to me, but we didn't get that like afterglow, those afterglow talks of like, so here we are back in rehearsal after a show. So how'd the show go? Of course we talked after the show itself, but then it's always nice a few days later to talk again and see how you're really feeling. We haven't had that. Hopefully we'll have that next rehearsal or next time we get together. But in terms of anxiousness, I guess I'm anxious about the Art Life show now because I haven't checked in on it yet.
Right.
And I do have a solo that I have to get back. And the plan was that I would be able to work on it at home, but that didn't really happen. I had a sick kid to take care of.
Exactly. Exactly.
So I'm trusting over the next few weeks this will come together. I'm trusting my mood will relax and I will get excited again to do this, because it is an exciting opportunity. Don't get me wrong. Right now I'm still like just in like to-do list mode and feeling anxious about it. So
well, I figured that since John missed that rehearsal, I would share with you, our colleagues, and John, what transpired with Mandy and Lorena as they were kind of like our discussion a couple of times ago when you bring back pieces from your repertory after sometimes a significant period of time has gone by. What's that like? So I'll try to paint that portrait a little bit for you. But rehearsal began once again with a conversation about Lorena's challenges with her new business venture. And again, I think by processing what she was carrying psychologically and emotionally related to that with Mandy and I, enabled her then to kind of say, okay, now I can be present for the rehearsal. So that was, I think, helpful for her. A nice bonding experience for all of us, as usual. So Lorena originally hoped to have all 5 sections of her piece called Voices completed for Art Life, but it soon became evident that there was simply not enough time to do that. So she decided, okay, we're going to go with sections 1 and 2, which have already been choreographed and were rehearsed, not recently, but for previous showing. And they decided to start with Brittle Branches. Just a quick run through, and felt very confident about it, not surprisingly. Check that one off. They then decided to start with voices, and just FYI, they had not had the time to review the videos of the section 1 and 2. So they were really essentially reconstructing from memory. And they first tried to walk through section 1, which is the duet that Lorena and Mandy danced together, and do it without music. And of course, another external challenge was the fact that they could not pull up the video on the phone. So, okay, they hadn't had the chance to review it before, but now, when they were really counting on it, it wasn't available. So they decided to put on the music, and certainly and especially, I think, for Lorena, that's always key, because of course you learn the choreography and the music, together, and so one can cue the other. And sure enough, the choreography started to come back more and more, and they continued on at that point to section 2, which is Mandy's solo. She goes through it. There was just one phrase, I think, that she was a little unclear about, and remembered everything else, to which she attributed it to muscle memory, that it just absolutely came back, which was great. They returned to the duet again and walked and talked their way through it without music, started to remember more, and then did a run through with music. And so each time a little more comes back, a little bit more, and with that run through, they were able to really clarify certain choreographic details in the moment, correct spacing in the moment. And Lori even said, I think I'm going to change a couple of things, but don't worry, not today. Whether or not she will, we're going to have to see.
I'm sure she will.
Okay, then she probably will. So we'll see how that goes. And then again, another run through of section 2 for Mandy, and it was, to my eye, flawless. She recalled virtually everything. So finally, it was time to work on Mandy's piece for Lorena. And again, they try to pull up the video. Can't do it. Okay, and Lorena starts to dance it and then draws a blank. So together, Mandy and Lorena literally reconstructed this piece repeatedly, and then thought, let's put on the music, even though it's abstract music that Neil Alexander composed for this piece. But it did turn out to help Lorena tremendously to get back the choreography. But she did note that, okay, I'm getting the steps back, but I'm not recalling the timing because the music is abstract. So she said, I'm going to need to work on that. And she was really able to identify the gaps that existed, but felt, okay, when Mandy sends her the video during the week, she'll fill in those gaps, felt confident about that. And overall, Mandy felt it was a good, what she called a good sketch of the piece. And in general, Mandy and Lorena were actually pleased with the rehearsal, considering that they were really pulling these pieces back together after literally months have gone by between the hiatus over the summer and then the focus on Brittle Branches up until the Emelin show. So it's been quite a long time. But it is coming back, John. So, and as John mentioned, because he didn't feel well either, he really couldn't do much work on his solo Embers and Ash at home. But that does lead me to the last question of the evening, just preliminarily at this point, since you too are bringing a piece back that you have not looked at in quite quite a long time, many
Right.
months. Initial feelings?
I'm nervous about it. I probably shouldn't be. It has been a while, so off the top of my head, I can't remember the choreography, but I'm certain that once I sort of get into the zone of trying to remember it and starting to physicalize it, a lot will come back. But until I do that, I'm anxious about it. I think I also put a lot of pressure on myself about this solo specifically too. So it feels like maybe there's just 1,000 little details that I have to get back. That's what it sort of feels like right now. Again, I'm sure that once I actually start the process of bringing it back, it'll come much more quickly. But I think with everything else just going on in my life, it's just there's just so many other things to think about that it seems like there's not enough room in my head for it.
Understandably, sure.
Again, I'm trusting that we do have some time, and that once that ball is rolling, pace will pick up, my mood will change, and it'll all be good come go time.
And fortunately, it's a solo, so you're not reliant on
I am
anyone
not.
else.
I am not. I'm
or
fully.
rehearsal space.
I am fully anticipating if I need to, I will be in my basement,
Right.
in the middle of the night if I have to.
Oh my.
Going over what I need to go over. I have that luxury, if you can call it that.
Relatively so. At any rate. And perhaps it will come back to you in a way that's somewhat similar to Lorena and Mandy's experience. Just, bit by bit by bit.
Yeah.
Repetition.
Yeah.
That's
how it goes. Yeah. And I should trust that that's going to be fine, but
may not feel that
until
way, right?
it actually happens,
Right.
I'm anxious about it. Yeah.
Well, we will, of course, keep you posted on John's psychological landscape.
It's a rocky one.
Whose isn't really? As we approach the Art Life show, and again, it's been a packed and exciting several months of debuts and premieres and opportunities to share art that you've been working on for a long time, and that's very important to you with the public. So you'll be right there with us as we continue with the process. So thank you very much for joining us this evening, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
All right. Good night.
Good night.